Before I start, quick note, if you enjoy real-life stories about family betrayal, justice, and standing up for yourself, please consider subscribing. It really helps the channel grow. So, I never thought I'd be writing something like this, but here I am. My name is Emily, I'm 27, born and raised in Ohio, and this story is about how my own aunt tried to erase me from my family's legacy. Growing up, my family always looked normal from the outside, holidays together, smiles for photos, polite hugs. But underneath that, there was always tension, especially when it came to money. My Aunt Linda, my mom's older sister, was the kind of woman who smiled while calculating. She always talked about family first, yet somehow everything always ended up benefiting her. When my grandfather passed away, people kept saying, "Don't worry, he left everything fair and square." I wanted to believe that. I really did. But looking back now, the warning signs were there long before I ever realized what she was capable of. The inheritance came from my grandfather, Robert, the only adult in my childhood who ever made me feel truly seen. He wasn't rich in a flashy way, but he was careful, disciplined, and smart with money. Over decades, he built a modest but valuable estate, his paid-off house in a quiet suburb, a savings account, and a small investment portfolio he'd started long before I was born. When my mom passed away when I was 19, my grandfather became my anchor. He told me more than once that he wanted to make sure I'd be okay in the future. He even mentioned setting up a trust in my name, something to help me finish school and eventually buy my own place. I remember Linda sitting nearby during one of those conversations, nodding politely, saying nothing. After Grandpa died, Linda immediately volunteered to handle everything. The will, the paperwork, the lawyer, all of it. She said it was easier that way. At the time, I was grieving and overwhelmed, so I let her. That decision would haunt. At first, nothing seemed wrong. Linda told me the estate was complicated and that probate in Ohio could take months, maybe longer. She spoke confidently, using legal words I didn't fully understand, and every time I asked questions, she brushed them off with a calm smile. "Trust me, Emily. I've got this handled." Weeks turned into months. I never saw a single document. No copies of the will. No letters from a lawyer. Just Linda's updates, always vague, always delayed. Then one day, by pure accident, I found out the house had already been transferred into her name. She didn't tell me, I didn't sign anything. Yet somehow, she'd positioned herself as the sole executor and beneficiary. Later, I learned she'd claimed I was too young, unstable, and not responsible enough to manage money. She used my grief, my age, and my trust as weapons. By the time I realized what was happening, Linda already had control over everything my grandfather left behind. When I confronted Linda with what I'd discovered, she didn't panic, she smiled. She told me I was confused and claimed Grandpa had changed his mind at the last minute. According to her, he'd decided I wasn't ready and trusted her to manage things responsibly. She said it so smoothly, it almost sounded believable. Behind my back, she was telling the rest of the family that I was unstable, emotional, and obsessed with money. I later learned she'd shown relatives a copy of the will, a version no one else had seen, where my name barely appeared. The signatures looked wrong, but no one questioned her. She'd also pressured the family lawyer, insisting Grandpa wanted everything simplified to avoid drama. Anytime I pushed back, she played the victim. "I'm just trying to protect you," she'd say. And the worst part? For a moment, I almost believed her. The moment everything clicked wasn't dramatic, it was quiet, and that somehow made it worse. I was sitting alone in my apartment, rereading Linda's last text where she told me to let go and move on. That sentence stayed with me. Why was she so desperate for me to stop asking questions? I started replaying every conversation in my head. The delays. The missing paperwork. The way she always spoke for my grandfather, never with his actual words. Then I remembered something he once told me, very clearly, "Emily, everything is documented. No one can just take it." That's when fear turned into suspicion. I realized Linda wasn't just managing the inheritance, she was hiding it from me. And people who hide things usually have something to lose. For the first time, I stopped doubting myself and started wondering how deep her deception really went. I decided to stop asking Linda questions and start looking for answers on my own. I contacted the county probate office, expecting resistance, but instead, I found silence where there should have been transparency. The clerk told me there was a trust filed in my name, dated 2 years before my grandfather died. That alone made my hands shake. I requested copies. When the documents arrived, everything became terrifyingly clear. Grandpa's original will named me as the primary beneficiary, with Linda listed only as a temporary executor, but there was a second will, filed weeks after his death, with altered wording and a signature that didn't match his handwriting. Even worse, the notary stamp belonged to someone who had already retired before that date. That night, I found an old voicemail from Grandpa saved on my phone. His voice cracked as he said, "Don't let anyone change this, Em." I finally had proof. I went to Linda's house the next morning with the documents shaking in my hands. I didn't plan a speech. I just wanted the truth. The moment I mentioned the trust, her expression changed, not fear, but irritation, like I'd crossed a line I wasn't supposed to. She laughed when I showed her the papers. "You went behind my back," she snapped, turning it on me instantly. She said the signatures were close enough and accused me of digging up the past because I was broke and desperate. When I brought up the notary issue, she waved it off, claiming it was a clerical error. Then she started crying. Loud, dramatic sobs. She told me I was attacking her while she was grieving her father. She called me ungrateful, selfish, and cruel. By the end, I was shaking, not because she convinced me, but because I finally saw how far she'd go to protect her lie. After that confrontation, everything spiraled fast. Within days, relatives stopped returning my calls. Family group chats went silent, except for one message from a cousin telling me to stop harassing Linda. She had already gotten to them. She told everyone I was trying to steal her inheritance and that I'd threatened legal action out of spite. Then came the threats. Linda left me a voicemail saying I was playing a dangerous game and that lawyers would tear me apart if I kept pushing. A week later, I received a formal letter demanding I cease all contact regarding the estate. Seeing my own aunt's name at the bottom made my stomach drop. To make things worse, the landlord raised my rent unexpectedly. I was drowning financially and emotionally, completely alone, exactly where Linda wanted me. But instead of breaking me, it lit something darker inside me. That was the lowest point. I remember sitting on the floor of my apartment, surrounded by unopened bills, listening to Linda's voicemail on repeat. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped my phone. I felt stupid for ever trusting her. Angry at myself. Furious at her. And completely betrayed by a family that chose her lies over my truth. I cried until my chest hurt. Not just for the money, but for my grandfather, for the promise he made me and the way it was being erased. Every memory of him felt like it was being stolen too. For a moment, I thought about giving up. Letting her win, letting it all disappear. But something snapped. The sadness turned into anger, sharp, focused, and steady. I realized Linda was counting on me breaking down and staying quiet. And I decided, right there on the floor, that I wouldn't. If she wanted a fight, she'd picked the wrong person. The next morning, I wiped my face, made coffee, and did something I'd been avoiding out of fear. I called a lawyer. My voice shook when I explained everything, but the woman on the other end listened carefully. When I mentioned the forged signature and the notary issue, she went quiet. Then she said the words I'll never forget, "This is serious fraud." That was the moment my fear finally cracked. I gathered every document I had, every message, every voicemail from Linda. I requested official handwriting analysis and filed a formal complaint with the probate court. Each step felt terrifying, but also empowering. Linda wanted me isolated and silent. Instead, I was building a paper trail she couldn't erase. I wasn't doing this just for the inheritance anymore. I was doing it because someone had to stop her, and because my grandfather trusted me to protect what he left behind. Once the legal process started, the balance shifted faster than I expected. My attorney filed an emergency motion to freeze the estate, which meant Linda could no longer sell, transfer, or touch a single asset. When she was served the papers, she called me screaming, accusing me of ruining the family and making things public. That's when I knew she was scared. During discovery, things got even uglier, for her. The handwriting expert confirmed the signature on the second will was not my grandfather's. The notary whose stamp appeared on the document submitted an affidavit stating she had never met him. Even the lawyer Linda claimed had handled everything admitted, under oath, that she'd pressured him to simplify the paperwork. For the first time, Linda wasn't controlling the narrative. The court was. And every piece of evidence peeled away another layer of the image she'd built, revealing the truth underneath. The hearing was the first time I saw Linda without her confident smile. Sitting across the courtroom, she looked tense, angry, and cornered. When the judge questioned her about the altered will, her story changed 3 times in under 5 minutes. She contradicted herself so badly that even her own attorney kept glancing at her in disbelief. Then came the moment that broke her facade completely. The judge played a recorded voicemail, one Linda had left me, threatening legal destruction if I didn't back off. The room went silent. Her voice, sharp and cruel, filled the courtroom. No tears, no concern. Just control and intimidation. Family members who had once defended her sat frozen. Some wouldn't even look at her. In that moment, everyone saw what I'd seen all along, not a grieving daughter, but a woman willing to lie, bully, and steal to get what she wanted. The ruling came faster than anyone expected. The judge invalidated the fraudulent will, reinstated my grandfather's original trust, and removed Linda as executor effective immediately. She was ordered to repay every dollar she'd taken from the estate, plus legal fees. Watching her face as the numbers were read aloud was surreal, the confidence drained from her completely. But the legal consequences were only part of it. Word spread quickly through the family. The same relatives who'd called me dramatic stopped speaking to her altogether. Invitations disappeared. Holidays went quiet. Linda didn't just lose money, she lost the image she'd spent decades building. There was also a referral for criminal investigation. Forgery. Fraud. Abuse of fiduciary duty. I don't know where that will end, but I know this, for the first time, Linda couldn't lie her way out. Reality finally caught up with her. When everything was finally settled, it felt unreal. The house my grandfather had worked his entire life to pay off was legally transferred back into the trust, my trust. The remaining funds were restored, and for the first time since his death, I felt like his wishes had actually been honored. I didn't feel the joy I expected. Instead, there was a quiet sense of peace. Justice isn't loud. It doesn't celebrate. It simply restores balance. I sold the house a few months later, not out of spite, but because I needed to move forward without carrying the weight of that place. I used part of the money to pay off my debts and went back to school like my grandfather had wanted. Linda never apologized. She avoided me completely. And honestly, I didn't need her words. The truth had already spoken louder than anything she could say. Looking back now, I realize the inheritance was never really about money. It was about respect, trust, and the belief that family should protect you, not prey on you. Losing all of that at once nearly broke me. But fighting for it showed me something I didn't know I had, strength. If there's one thing I learned, it's this: silence only protects the person doing wrong. Greedy relatives depend on your fear, your exhaustion, and your desire to keep the peace. But peace built on injustice is just another kind of loss. If you're reading this and something feels off in your own family situation, listen to that feeling. Ask questions. Document everything. And don't let anyone convince you that standing up for yourself makes you selfish. I didn't just reclaim an inheritance. I reclaimed my voice. And that was worth every battle along the way.